On the outskirts of India's national capital, a massive protest by the Ahir community is demanding a separate regiment for their community in the Indian military. I'm Barkha Dutt, you're with the Mojo story. On the program today, we will decode what's behind this demand and the colonial history of other caste-based regiments in our forge. Remember, there has been no new caste-based regiment raised after India turned independent. This is something that is a colonial hangover, but an arrangement that the military has chosen to stay with. The Ahirs are saying that they should be recognized just as there are other caste based identity regiments, whether they be the Jats, the Rajputs, the Mahars, or any other group. But the military is saying there is absolutely no need to change this. How do we understand in the India of 2022 why this brave, valorous community wants a separate regiment to be raised in its name? That is the program that is going to focus today on this very, very sensitive but important issue of both military history as well as our present and future. And we've got a stellar panel of experts, mostly all veterans, to try and decode this for us. Let me introduce them all one by one. Welcoming to the program is General Rakesh Sharma, who's, of course, been a veteran of the Indian military. Welcome to the program, sir. We're also joined on the program by Major Yogesh Dahiya. He's an army veteran, and he will talk a little bit about his experience on the ground, because remember, the epicenter of these protests today is the state of Haryana. We're also joined by military historian, Squadron Leader Rana Chhina. Thank you very much, sir. It's a pleasure to have you with us. General Hasnain, great to see you as always, sir. General Hasnain has been the GOC commanding of the 15th Corps in the Kashmir Valley. Joining us on the program today is lawyer Abhishek Sudhir. He has in the past joined us as a supporter of the Samajwadi Party, one of the many parties that is supporting this demand, but he is very clear that he is today speaking in an apolitical capacity. So I just wanted to clarify that. Thank you, Abhishek. And also joining us is a military historian, Professor Sabyasachi Dasgupta. Thank you very much, everybody. General Hasnain, I'd like to start with you. All of you know a lot of things that the Aam Janta doesn't. When the Aam Janta hears that in India of 2022 there is a caste-driven regiment demand, people would recoil from it instinctively. But when you get into this issue further, you do realize that there are many other paltons, many other regiments that are centered around caste, but not exclusively drawn from that caste community. So, how do you see this protest demand by the Ahir community, sir?
Barkha, thank you for having me on your show. And yes, this is a very sensitive subject. I'm aware of that I am addressing a very sensitive issue. Starting off primarily first with, I have great respect for the Ahir community. Let me, for your sake of our viewers, tell them, you remember the Battle of Chushul, the famous Battle of Razangla. It was fought by 13 Kumaon. 13 Kumaon is a pure Ahir unit. Imagine the last man, last round battle that they fought. Almost 128 of them perished there, gave their lives for this country. Having said that, the Indian Army has, since independence, just frozen the policy on creation of different caste-based, religion-based or region-based regiments. Except there have been two or three exceptions that I must point out. For example, the Naga regiment was raised in 1971, but it was raised as a part of the Kumaon regiment. The Sikkim Scouts have been raised recently, just to meet the basic aspirations. This is a purely from a tactical point of view. Scouts are supposed to be belonging to the area where they serve. They are also form a part of 11 Gurkhas, which is the regiment to which General Rakesh Sharma belongs. So these are one or two such examples. Besides that, everything remains frozen. The colonial system was such that it recognized what is called the theory of martial classes. And perhaps based upon that, like my regiment, the Garhwal Rifles, only came up in 1887 as an offshoot of the Gurkhas. Before that, the martial qualities of Garhwalis was not recognized as such. As progressively the British realized the value and worth of different castes and creeds of the Indian subcontinent. They kept raising these regiments. And but after 47, this was completely frozen. I think the policy today should continue to remain the same. We have had attempts, all kinds of attempts, to try and create problems in the Indian Army by such issues such as the Muslim regiment. You would probably be aware of allegations from Pakistan to say that India had a Muslim regiment and it disbanded it after 1965. I have personally been writing on that to neutralize all those kind of allegations which have taken place. What I want to say is that if you start this, there's no end to it. There are 7 northeastern states. All of them are subsumed under what is called the Assam regiment. Marvelously managed, not an issue at all. Traditions of the regiment maintained. The Indian Army is tradition based. And therefore, I think raising up these issues at this time by people who are not aware of the sensitivities within the army, I think that is an unfair one on the army itself.
Well, I think that's a very important opening comment, and you're absolutely right that this nonsense about India disbanding a Muslim regiment needs to be called out in the era of fake news. But for the sake of our audience, and please, I'm not an expert, so everybody correct me if I'm wrong, pre-independence, there were regiments like the Brahmin regiment, the Chamar regiment that were actually disbanded. But after independence, this has not happened at all. All of these suggestions or insinuations, especially from Pakistan, adversaries like Pakistan, are absolute bunkum. But here we are confronted, General Sharma, with a real and present protest. In fact, members of the Ahir community, some of them have been sitting on an indefinite sit-in since the beginning of February. We are now at the end of March. As General Hasnain mentioned, the Battle of Rizangla is only one of the many battles where this brave community, mostly drawn from South Haryana, showed its valor. How do you see this debate, sir, General Rakesh Sharma?
Thank you, Barkha, for inviting me. It's an honor coming here. Let me first also say that I fully endorse what Jan Hasnain has said. We have served with the Ahir community, the Yadavs, and we are in awe. They are very valiant soldiers, brave soldiers. I commanded 14 Corps, which is the Ladakh-based corps, and I've been to Rizangla a number of times myself. And each time you went there, you had a feeling of pride reaching there and see what kind of valor was shown across there. Having said that, I think let me put some facts and figures on the record. Do we take people from various communities as per community quotas in the Indian Army? Firstly, that's a hearsay. We do not do so. We allot quotas as per the governmental policy of giving to state. So a state like, say, if we take in the Indian Army takes about 48,000 people every year, the quota laid down for Haryana state is 2%. That's because that's the recruitable male population that comes up. The recruitable male population, 2.16 or some factor comes out to Haryana. Everybody competes to join the Indian Army as an individual. He could be Jat, could be Ahir, could be Gujjar, anybody. And then the merit is drawn and people are taken in. And similarly is true for all regiments. So I can name any state. You can go to Uttar Pradesh would have a quota of say 16% because Uttar Pradesh is a larger state. You draw the merit out of the people who are selected, and then you decide, okay, which caste a fellow comes from. Is a Jat, he goes to Jat regiment. A Rajput would go to Rajput regiment, and if he's a Gujjar, I mean, if he's a Gujjar, Ahir. Now, Ahir, there are pure Ahir units. They are pure Ahir units.
Sorry, just complete your point. There are pure Ahir units, as General Hasnain also mentioned, in the Kumaon regiment. But I'll let you complete your point. But I had a follow-up question for you.
So the pure Ahir regiments are also there in artillery. There are pure Ahir units. And see, this demand is not only of the Ahir community. There are 10% of Indian population is Gujjars. And Gujjars have done as well in history. Mahir Bhoj and, Brigadier Chandpuri and Kamal Rao. These people have all done Victoria Crosses and MVCs in the war. So then how do you stop Gujjars not asking for the same thing? And how would you not have other communities also coming up, the Meenas and others saying that we all want regiments? It was rightly frozen in a manner. And let me add one last issue before you take me on again. It's not that the Indian armed forces, especially the infantry, is only pure unit. Infantry has many regiments which are all mixed up: Brigade of Guards, Para Regiment, the Grenadiers, there is Mahar Regiment. They are all mixed up regiments, and
And
they
that
have
was, in
performed
fact,
brilliantly.
and
Brilliantly.
that, sir, was going to be my question, that I think it's important to explain to our audience that if a regiment is named after a certain ethnicity, caste, or even religion, as it is with the Sikhs, it doesn't mean that the officers in these units, in these paltans, are actually from that community. The personnel might well be, but the officers are not. Can you explain that distinction of how this recruitment actually takes place?
So, we see about 32 to 35 lakh people every year in recruitment rallies, which are about 150 all over the country. They are carried out in a very impartial manner where the recruitment is carried out. Officers, you delink or sell. Officers are selected and as part of the UPSC examination. They go to the service selection boards and they are allotted to regiments. And there is a very excellent system which the MS branch, HR branch has worked out, in which they maintain a balanced profile in each one of the units. An officer can be from South India or North India or East India. So a balanced profile is maintained. So officers is a separate cadre and excellent. Like Prameshwaram was a Mahar Regiment officer and he got the finest of awards. Or,
Yeah.
Brahmins. You can say now the Brahmins also there, and the Brahmins also have done exceedingly well. Tomorrow the Brahmins will also say we want a Brahmin regiment. Where will we stop this thing here?
And as a matter of record, in 2017, you actually had the scheduled caste sort of commission writing to the military saying, please explain why the chamar, I'm using it in quotes so that it's clear I'm not using it as a caste pejorative, why the chamar regiment should not be reinstated. So both of you are quite right in saying that this is going to have a domino effect. But Squadron Leader Chhina, if I may bring you in, one of the questions the protesters have specifically raised is about the president's bodyguard, where there are very, very specific requirements of which sort of soldiers are recruited, including the height of the soldier. Do correct me if I'm wrong, but I read that you have to be at least 6 feet tall and so on. Now, when it comes to the president's bodyguard, the protesters are saying that this recruitment is restricted to three caste groups. Now, can you come in on this ongoing debate, sir?
Thank you for having me, Barkha. And I just like to say that I agree with what my predecessors have said on the panel. And I'd also just like to make a very quick point because you spoke before I addressed the issue of the PBG. You spoke of officers. As far as an officer is concerned, he has no jat, he has no religion. He takes on the identity of his troops because that's what he identifies with. General Hasnain was commanding a pure Hindu company, a pure Hindu regiment, and it didn't matter what his personal beliefs or things were. He identified with, and his men identified him as one of themselves. So please delink the officers as far as the Indian Army or the Indian
No,
armed
I,
forces.
I, I just think people don't know that. So when this debate happens, I brought it up so that people know that it's not that if there's a Jat regiment, a Jat officer will be its CO or a Jat officer will be commanding it. So I just wanted our audience, Squadron Leader Chinna, to know that.
Yeah. So you're absolutely right, and I'm sure General Hasnain will elaborate on that further. I remember there's some very interesting and very inspiring anecdotes that he has mentioned. You know how when he was relieving a company of the Grenadiers. So perhaps you would like to just quickly weigh in on that.
Yeah, let me just bring in General Hasnain
Okay.
and then I'll come back to Squadron Leader Chinna on the president's bodyguard. General Hasnain, please go ahead.
Very, very, very briefly, for those who may not know, I am a Muslim. I command pure Hindu troops. The Garhwalis are pure Hindus. And in a peace station such as Lucknow, Sunday morning, you have the unit Mandir. The unit Mandir is led by me, a Muslim. Unless the Aarti ki thali comes to me, the Aarti cannot start. My wife and I lead the Aarti of the unit, and we are Muslims. Similarly, let me tell you, Grenadiers, I had a company of grenadiers who relieved me in Punch. They were pure Muslims, and they had a Hindu company commander called Chauhan, I still remember. And I remember early morning when I was asking his Sahayak as to what noise was he making at 4 o'clock in the morning, he said he's giving sehri to his company commander, which meant that your company commander was about to keep a rosa. So I inquired further and found that the company commander keeps 30 rosas and says his prayers 5 times along with his troops. This is the Indian Army for you.
Yeah, I've always said that the best example of pluralism in our country is the military, because it's not just tolerating each other's faiths; it's actually participating in them. Squadron Leader Chhina, on the president's bodyguard, it's something that comes up from the protesters, especially today's protesters by the Ahir community again and again. Why is this recruitment confined to only three groups? Why is that the tradition?
So, as I think General Sharma also brought up the point, the Indian Army is a traditional-based organization, and some of these legacies have been handed down to us for the last 150, 200, 250 years. You're picking up a very, very small unit. The president's bodyguard, I think, is not more than maybe 100, 150 men. And to be honest, even if you were to change their class composition, it's not going to make any dent in anything, except that you will be now breaking with it is the oldest regiment in the Indian Army. You will be breaking a 300-year-old tradition. So I personally feel, and once again, I would just like to say that I have an enormous amount of regard for the Ahirs as a fighting community. They have, served this nation, served our armed forces and our army phenomenally well. Hats off to them. All honor, all respect due to them. But I do agree that the decision to freeze this kind of class-based organization of the Indian Army to whatever it was, and that is purely because that is it's a tradition that carries on. But as they have, as General Sharma very rightly pointed out, today recruitment is not class-based; it's regional-based, and so they have percentages based on the population of particular regions of the country. So you can be you can be A, B, C, or D, and you can apply. If you are selected,
of course,
you will be sent into the appropriate slot within the army or the armed forces.
Of course, before I get the legal and the historical perspective from non-military voices, I just want to bring in Major Dahiya in. Haryana today is the epicenter of these protests, Major Dahiya, but there are also states like Uttar Pradesh. There's cross-party support, by the way. This is not a BJP versus Congress debate. This is a strong community in Haryana, and every single politician, including some ministers of state in the government, have supported this protest. Your take, sir?
Ma'am, am I audible?
Yes, please go ahead.
Okay. Good evening to everyone. Ma'am, this is all political, and we are not serving any, community-based army or nation. It is for everyone to be there, and for Indian Army, it is to serve the nation. That's all. We have enough on the community lines, but what I would say is, post-independence, there has been none. We want to get away from the system we were introduced to, because that was to serve the purpose of Britishers and not India. Today's Indian Army serves the purpose of India, and we do not need any community-based new regiment, at least.
Very interesting reference by you, Major Dahiya, which I would like to now take to the others, is do we need to change what used to exist? So I think we're all in agreement that we don't need new regiments based on caste identities. But there are others who have said, then why not lose the old ones? Let me put this to Professor Sabyasachi and to Abhishek. Abhishek, let me start with you. Go ahead.
Well, Barkha, honestly, I support the demand for an Ahir regiment. I'll explain to you why. The first thing is the Indian Army needs to explain why they don't change the name of the regiments. The Sikh Light Infantry was called the Sikh Ramdasiya Regiment. It was changed to the Sikh Light Infantry. So renaming a regiment is not such a difficult task. Why not rename the Jat or the Sikh Regiment or the Rajputana Rifles and make them, why not a Bhagat Singh Regiment, for example? It's as simple as that. Now, why do I support the demand for an Ahir regiment? Their demand is not based on their caste. Their demand is based on the fact that they want their valor recognized. At the Battle of Rezangla, 114 Ahirs laid down their lives. The song "E Mere Watan Ke Logo" was written for the sacrifice of the Ahirs. Why not commemorate the valor of the Ahirs by naming a regiment after them? Now, Manohar Parrikar, the defense minister, was asked, why are you not renaming the regiments? The answer he gave was, this is functional cohesion. This is about regimental ethos and culture. So if this is about regimental ethos and culture, and that is why you want to keep the name Jat Regiment or Rajput Rajputana Rifles? Why not commemorate the Ahirs? The army is a status quoist organization. Me as a constitutional lawyer, my job is to ensure that the status quo does not remain. So we come at this from two very different arguments. For me, this is a social justice issue. Look at the Battle of Bhima Koregaon, Barkha. If you ask me, that was not a battle between the British and the Marathas. That was a battle between the Mahars and the Peshwas. The Mahars fought against the Brahminical oppression and repression. They won that battle. When they sought to commemorate that battle in Pune, we have people like Sudha Bharadwaj and various intellectuals who have been jailed because they took part in that commemoration of the Battle of Bhima Koregaon. And then you have movies made about other battles. You know, Kesari, I think, is the movie Akshay Kumar made, where battles are commemorated when they're generally fought by upper castes. I'm sorry, that's how I view it. Whereas a lower caste battle like the Battle of Bhima Koregaon is not commemorated. The Indian army says that we are blind to caste and religion, but I'm sorry, the Indian society that makes your members are drawn from Indian society.
So hang on. Let me ask you.
Let
me ask you. What you're saying is, why not rename some of the regiments? Is that what you're saying? That if there are, as General Sharma said, there are already units that exist that are pure Ahir units, why not tinker with the name to reflect that diversity? I think one of the counter arguments is, where does it end? Where does it end, right? And I hang on. Let me just get Professor Sabyasachi to add to this, and I'd love for everybody to respond to what Abhishek has said. Professor Sabyasachi, we all agree that this is a colonial legacy, but so are so many things in our country, and we have modernized them or adapted them to our own present, which is why, as the generals have explained, this is a system that has been frozen. It's also important for our audience to understand that when General Hasnain spoke about martial and non-martial classes, almost, that the British tried to divide and rule India through, this happened after the first war of independence, after 1857. That is also the context. Now, go ahead, Professor Sabyasachi.
See, after 1857, they immediately did not see. For 20 years, they kept what is called a balanced recruitment policy, where they basically paired off various communities against each other. It is only when the so-called menace from Russia or a danger from Russia, the British thought that there was a danger from Russia would come up and attack India, that they decided to adopt the martial race theory. And the propounder was General Roberts and a lot of General McMahon and a lot of other people. Actually, since we are talking about Ahirs and all, there was a martial race theory even pre-1857, though it was not known as the martial race theory, because there were three armies then: Bengal, Madras, and Bombay, corresponding to the three presidencies. The Bengal army, which corresponded to basically what is today Bengal, Bihar, Orissa, and parts of UP, though there were no Bengalis taken or Urias taken, had upper caste Purvayas or upper caste Biharis, and mostly upper caste Biharis before 1830 and 1840, when the Gurkhas and the Sikhs were taken in, and certain Ahirs, and there were certain Ahirs in the regiment. It is only so this was also some sort of a martial race theory, because it was held that the upper caste Purvayas are better fighters, more loyal, taught to fight well right from childhood, so they make better fighters. Whereas other communities like the Bengalis and all, they do not make good fighters. And it was also recognized that if there is a lower caste, middle caste regiments, middle caste communities like the Ahirs, they are also good fighters. But everything changed after 1857, when the Purvayas were completely dismantled, because the Bengal army was the army which actually mutinied in the 1857 War of Independence. So most of these regiments sort of mutinied. So the Purvayas, the intake from the Bengal was drastically reduced.
Let me take this now to the rest of the panel. General Sharma, if you'd like to jump in, and then General Hasnain. You know, you've heard two arguments which are saying, why not rename the regiments, giving the history. What would you say to that, General Sharma? Sorry, so you're on mute. Yeah, go ahead now. Yeah.
So I accept what the advocate was saying, the honorable advocate was saying, that army is a status quoist organization. All armed forces the world over are status quoist organizations. We are not. We may be slightly a notch better, more status quoist than the others, but we are as most armed forces are. Second is that armed forces are not a social mobility equipment. We are not for social mobility for the nation, or for politicking part of it. Let the politics be carried out where politics needs to be carried out. Don't carry out politics on the shoulders of the finest institutions that exist in India, which is the Indian Army. You know, you do that, you're causing problems within an organization which are not required at all. Now, having said that, I would also say that the theory about two issues that you have raised. One is homogeneity and functional cohesiveness. Indeed, I'm from Gurkhas. Atta is from Gadwal Rifles. We pride ourselves for the cohesiveness. But let me take this argument forward. Assam Regiment from 7 states, Madras Regiment from all southern states, where people speak every known language in southern India. They perform brilliantly well, both Assam Regiment and Madras Regiment, despite the fact that you can say they start not as a cohesive unit as the Gurkhas would or the Garhwalis would. But Brigade of Guards, one of the finest RR units, Rashtriya Rifle units in North Kashmir, is a Brigade of Guards unit, which is all mixed up units from every part of India. So cohesiveness can also be driven to a point. So having said that, I would also like to argue that there is no harm in actually thinking differently. I am not saying take Ahir as a regiment. No, that is a full stop. But we need to also probably imagine a little better on getting out of this mold of too much of fixation. Parachute Regiment has got people from all over India. They do fantastically well. And let me add one bit. There are about 1,600 major units in Indian Army, all commanded by colonels. Of the 1,600 units, there are less than 500 which can be said as pure units. Baki jo 1,100 units are impure units. Are they not going to fight wars? I mean, is the war fighting only left to Gurkhas and Gadwalis and Kumaunis?
Absolutely,
so everybody is going to fight wars. So let's not push the issue further to what has been existing as a status quo. If you say that there is a need of changing Gurkha rifles and merging it with Gadwal rifles or Kumaon, well, that's a prospective idea and can be followed through in times to come.
So before I come to General Hasnain, Abhishek, Sudhir, if you'd just like to interject briefly, and then I'll go to General Hasnain.
Yeah. Barkha, you see, what my frustration with the Indian Army is their refusal to concede even an inch to civil society. We say that the Presidential Bodyguard, if you're a Jat, or you're a Jat Sikh or you're a Rajput, you can be in the Presidential Bodyguard. No other caste or community is allowed to apply to the Presidential Bodyguard. I don't think it's enough to say, oh, it's only 150 people and, it's a functional requirement. The requirements are you have to be 6 feet tall, you have to have a certain build. Are you telling me that apart from these 3 castes, you can't find people who are 6 feet tall and have a certain build to serve in the Presidential Bodyguard? I don't think so. Again, yes, it's the status quo argument. But also, Barkha, the Caravan magazine carried out a caste analysis of all the martyrs at Pulwama. The CRPF, unlike the Indian Army, Barkha,
but can I interject there? Because I think that a lot of soldiers, and I've spent my life reporting the military, would find this idea of doing this itself abhorrent, right? Because one of the things that we have always looked towards the military for is to reflect that diversity, is the power of the uniform above these identities. So hold your thought on that Caravan magazine. I'd really be uncomfortable decoding and breaking down martyrs along caste lines. I just want to bring in General Hasnain on the President's Bodyguard and say this. Is there a need, while not accepting the need to raise regiments based on caste, for some reform, for some change, as General Sharma has alluded to, like with the President's Bodyguard?
See, Barkha, as far as the President's Bodyguard is concerned, it's a non-operational unit. It's a ceremonial unit, right? So I am not status quoist on it. And I have great respect for Advocate Abhishek. Let me tell you, his arguments are always very, very sound. But let me, on one aspect, civil society in India does not know enough about its own army. Very few people know enough. Now, let me tell you, how many people in this panel or otherwise, or even you, Barkha, would know that after 1984, the problem which you are aware of in Punjab, we experimented with 12 to 15 units in which companies from different battalions were brought in, merged under a single regiment. The Sikh regiment had a Gadwali company, I still remember. The Dogras also had a company from the Gadwal Rifles, which was sent. Do you know that while you were reporting in Kargil, even at that particular time, 18 Gadwal Rifles, which was a mixed unit, was being dismantled and returned to being a pure unit because everyone felt that this experiment had failed completely. How many people are aware of this? These things have been experimented in India. Let me tell you, in the Indian Army, we don't go public on all these kind of things, right? Yeah. We are essentially looking at order, effectiveness, the ability to win in battle. That is the most essential thing for me. The bottom line is that. Nothing else. You can change everything you want otherwise. We have had good experiments like the RR. The Garhwal Rifles RR is 36 RR, 14 RR, 48 RR. Numbers. Let's do away with the Garhwal Rifles and give them number 5 regiment, and all the battalions can be named as number 3, 5, 4, 5, 6, 5, like that. What the ethos that you're looking for, your historicity which you're looking for, the 3 Victoria Crosses from my regiment, the Mahavir Chakras won by my regiment, these are the things which drive us in battle. You cannot understand this military ethos unless you are really a part of it.
So one of the things that I remember discovering as a very young correspondent in Kargil was how much the Paltan itself was, in a sense, the source of the fighting spirit and the valor. So the Paltan is everything for the men, and now I soon hope one day the women who will don the uniform. But Squadron Leader Chhina, I do want to pick up the essence of Abhishek Sudhir's question. While I am as a signed up sort of sentimentalist about the Indian military, not comfortable with doing caste breakdowns of those who lose their lives in the line of duty, there is something to be asked and raised about when a military needs to change with the times. After all, the Indian military has had to change on gender inclusion. Let's pick up that as an example. The military has had to make space. The NDA is now opening its doors to women. So even status quo forces do have to change with the times. I think that's the essence of what Sudhir is trying to raise. Is there something about these formations of the regiments that needs to change, according to you, Squadron Leader Chhina?
So I absolutely agree. See, change is one of the constants of life, and there is no institution, no organization, no individual that is resistant to change. If you are resistant to change, you will perish. So, and the Indian Armed Forces and the Indian Army are very dynamic institutions. At the same time, yes, there has to be a certain degree of rigidity. That is a very function. They are pyramidal, hierarchical structures. But there's an American, and by the way, incidentally, there's very recently been a huge exercise within the armed forces, which was looking at what are we still encumbered with certain colonial legacies and so on and so forth. I would just say this, that firstly, there's an American saying that if it ain't broke, don't fix it. And I also support what General Hasnain has just said, that the army is not, or the armed forces, they are not instruments for social change. Please, there are other.
But they have to reflect. But they have to reflect that change. They are not the vehicles of change, but they have to reflect a changing country, a changing society. It happens the world over.
You're absolutely right about that. And armed forces is at best a reflection of the society that it serves. There is no two ways about it. However, even in a very non-traditional and a very different social structure such as Canada, they actually examined this kind of an issue, and they said, why are people wearing blue and green and white? Why don't we have, instead of Army, Navy, Air Force, just let's integrate everyone, and everybody wears one uniform, one rank, one everything. They went through that entire exercise, and then before you could say Jack Robinson, they were back to the original structures, because they realized that it didn't work. It didn't work for them, and I can assure you, it will not work for us. I mean, but does this mean that we do
not? But can I go back to the image we just saw on the screen? I was seeing that Rizangla commemoration. General Sharma, you'll be familiar with this. And one of the last slides that actually comes in it is very much about the Veer Ahir. So I think the point that the generals have been trying to make is that it isn't that there isn't acknowledgement of this even officially within the military. I think that's the point that's being made. Squadron Leader Chhina.
Yeah, no, of course there is an acknowledgement, see, the fact of the matter is, it's not, the Ahirs are not the only valiant community in this country. And of course, while Mr. Abhishek, he said, we are going to use that as an argument and say that, where do you stop? But that is a fact. There are any number of communities, if we go by that logic, which, you should now start looking to naming or raising regiments after. My personal view on this is that the way that the Indian Army is structured today, the way it has evolved, is part of a historical process. We need to now, as you very rightly point out, look forward, not look backwards. We must not now be starting to say, oh, let's
So here's
re-raise
the
a Mursi
question.
Ramdasiya regiment or
I
whatever.
agree. But here's the question, and I'll take it to Major Dahiya and then take last comments from all of you. Major Dahiya, you made a comment saying these regiments formed in this way was a British project. It is not the project of modern India. The question is, looking ahead, do these caste-based regiments need to go? Do they need to be scrapped? Do they need to be renamed? Does recruitment policy need to change?
Ma'am, no comments on policy, but who knows with the future? It
Yeah.
is always uncertain, and positive changes are always welcome. If at that time it is seen in country's interest, obviously they would go. If otherwise, they'll stay.
Yeah, I think that's the important part, right? Sudhir, Abhishek, Sudhir, if you'd want to come in and then I want to give the last word to the two generals, please do go ahead.
Yeah, Barkha, I think the question is what's in a name? There's a lot in a name. The Allahabad High Court remains the Allahabad High Court, not the Prayagraj High Court. The Madras High Court remains the Madras High Court and has not become the Chennai High Court. This is an element of status quoism and change has to come, Barkha. I just want to say the CRPF as a body has reservation. Why does the Indian Army not have reservation? The martyrs
No,
of Pulwama.
please, come on,
No, but
Sudhir,
Barkha, this is the
come
problem,
on.
right? Why are we so
No,
uncomfortable? Why are we scared? Can I just make my point 30 seconds?
Sure, of course.
We are okay talking about the gender issue. The Supreme Court was all for saying gender inclusivity in the Indian Army, right? And in the same plea, in the very same plea, caste-based reservation was a demand by the petitioners. The Supreme Court would not hear it. I have the Constitution of Baba Saheb Ambedkar behind me. That is my holy book, and that says that social diversity, caste inclusivity has to improve. If you're going to have caste-based regiments, right? If you're not even going to change their names, there's no reason why an Ahir regiment should not be formed commemorating the sacrifice of that caste and community. That's
okay. Can I take this to the generals? I'll start with General Sharma and then give General Hasnain the last word. I know I reacted very emotionally to Sudhir's point because I just feel that there are some institutions you want to save from competitive politics, and the Indian military is certainly one of them. And to bring quotas into this conversation is nothing, in my opinion, but competitive politics. I know Sudhir disagrees with me. General Sharma.
Yeah, Barkha, look, there's a book written by General G.D. Bakshi called Fighting Brahmins. He extols the virtues of Brahmins having done so well in life, especially Mohyal Brahmins. So that doesn't mean we have a Brahmin regiment. Like you said, there's a domino theory, and the domino theory must not be allowed to work here. That's first point. Second point you said about PBG, we need to change maybe 61 cavalry and President Bodyguard. President Bodyguard takes in a particular sect of Muslims called Kamkhani Muslims. Kamkhanis are those erstwhile historic riders. I think those things have moved on, and we have to say, okay, it should be, if you have to take people who are riding skills in Rajput, in Rajasthan, etc., then you broad base it, and we should move away from, say, Kamkhani Muslims. That is not a good idea. And the third point and last point I wish to raise is that if you follow what late General Bipin Rawat and CDS have been saying all this while, that the army, especially the infantry and the others, need to right size themselves. We are unable to match up the revenue budget of these. We are saying we need to right size and rethink it. If the Chinese had not tapped us on a door in 2020, we would have been right sizing and thinking of reducing the force than saying to raise one more regiment or do that. Our budgets are runaway as it is. So the fact of the matter is Chinese have helped us to retain us at this level. My thing is, and I'll end here, saying that if there is a positive change sought, as the advocate Abhishek was saying, that if we need to take a positive change and revise the names, like mechanized infantry picked up units from Garhwal rifles, from Gurkhas, everybody, and mechanized, they all became mechanized infantry. Units had moved on, and mechanized infantry done damn well. And so is true for armored regiment 51, 52, 53, 54. All those newly raised regiments are mixed regiments. So I end here.
Yeah, I'm glad to hear you talk actually about, how it would cost nothing for maybe the president's bodyguard to look at those changes, that some customs may have well outlived the context in which, frankly, the British brought them as an instrument of division. And we have to remember the historical context. And to Sudhir, I just like to clarify, it is not that I think the military should not reflect heterogeneity, inclusiveness. I just don't think that and a system of quotas is the way to reflect that. The recruitment policy does attempt to be extremely diverse, and anyone who served in the military will speak to that diversity, is the point that I was trying to make. General Hasnain, last word to you. How do we end this debate? Because I will remind our audience that it may not have got massive media coverage, but the Ahir community has been on an indefinite strike since the beginning of February. It's now entering its second month. You do not want this to become something like the farmers' protests, where it grows. You do not want other caste groups to join this discourse. We have seen previously petitions to reinstate, for example, the Chamar regiment. Go ahead, sir. General Hasnain, last word.
Thank you, Barkha. Thank you. For all the respect that I have for Advocate Abhishek Sudhir, I have deep respect for him. Let me tell you, the solution to your problem is you need to spend 7 days with me in Srinagar or in Ladakh, and you will get your answer. I can assure you this. Because what happened, I remember, one Director General from a particular force came to Kashmir and called me up and said, what makes the Rashtra Rifles different? I said, why don't you go and spend 1 day with them? He went and spent 1 day and rang me up in the evening. He said, I got my answer. You have to get the ethos of this organization right. This thing in your mind about reservations, where does it come from? I mean, you go and spend some time in Ladakh, any of the places, I'm sure General Rakesh Sharma will enable you to do it, or on the line of control, I'm willing to come and walk with you along there. And I can assure you, you will change your mind completely. The effectiveness of the Indian Army is based upon this ethos, the tradition that we carry. We are not status quoist. If you go there and see, in every other way, we are different. We are not status quoist. But these are issues which are very dear to us. And I think you need to respect that.
Okay, we leave it there. I will just add a little footnote to say that there is a sensitivity that is needed and an urgency that is needed in addressing this issue. However, the military and the government thinks it ought to be handled, because it is my fear that this could snowball and have other groups joining the chorus. And as all of you have warned, there is then no end to it. So it does present itself as a challenge, despite all of the great arguments we've heard here, also from General Sharma, that maybe some small changes, forward-looking changes, can be introduced, especially in traditions that have defined the President's Bodyguard, for example. Leaving it there to both General Sharma and General Hasnain, to Squadron Leader Chhina, to Advocate Abhishek Sudhir, to Major Dahiya, and to Professor Sabyasachi, who unfortunately could not reconnect. Thank you so much for your time, and to our audience as ever, thank you, and see you tomorrow. Goodbye. It's great to see you here. Thank you for watching our work. If you haven't subscribed yet, don't forget to click the bell icon and subscribe to Mojo Story and support independent, robust journalism.